My wife cheated with the coworker who made my life hell, so I teamed up with his wife to leave them both broke and destroyed. I'm 37 years old, and my wife, Tessa, is 33. Last night at our office Christmas party, I caught her and my colleague, Damon, making out on the patio. Damon works in the same department as me, and up until now, I haven't confronted Tessa about what I saw. So, everything I'm about to say is based purely on what I witnessed and the circumstantial evidence that's piled up. I have a strong hunch that their affair has been going on since last year's Christmas party, but they've done a damn good job keeping it under wraps. Back then, I was new to the company, and it was my first time attending the annual office event. Before that night, Damon and I never got along, not because I was the new guy, but because he saw me as a threat. See, in my very first week, I was assigned some of Damon's tasks, and I ended up automating them using my software skills. The work that took him an entire week? I knocked it out in just 3 days. That got me plenty of praise from management, but it also put a target on my back, at least from Damon's perspective. He spent a ridiculous amount of time trying to poke holes in my work, but he couldn't find a single flaw. The higher-ups even reprimanded him for not coming up with something similar on his own. You'd think that would have worked in my favor, but it only made things worse for me. Damon had a certain reputation in the office. He was popular, but more in a fake, gossipy way. The kind of guy who knew how to weasel his way into every social circle. People love gossip, and he was the kind who'd always stir the pot just enough to keep himself in the mix. Meanwhile, I was the opposite. I kept to myself, did my job, and went home. I wasn't interested in office drama. I had my small but solid circle of college buddies and, of course, my wife. That was enough for me. A couple of months after I joined, the company threw its annual Christmas party. I attended with Tessa. She's a beautiful woman, one of those people who naturally turns heads at any gathering. She knows how to dress, and she definitely enjoys the attention. That night, we were having a good time mingling with my coworkers, and as the night progressed, more and more people hit the dance floor. Tessa wanted us to join in, but I declined. Dancing has never been my thing, especially not at work events. I'm pretty sure Damon noticed that, because the next thing I knew, he was walking over to our table and asking Tessa for a dance. She looked at me, and I smiled, figuring she'd turn him down, especially considering the tension between us. But to my surprise, she agreed without hesitation. I watched as he led her to the dance floor, his face plastered with a smug grin. When she returned, she was flushed, laughing, and full of energy. She must have caught my expression because she immediately said, "Oh, don't be mad." How could I refuse? It would have been so rude. I couldn't exactly argue with that, and in the moment, I let it go. It was just a dance, after all. I got caught up with work after that and never imagined, not for a second, that my own wife would be sneaking around with the very man who had made my life miserable since I started at this company. Fast forward to this year's Christmas party. Once again, I arrived with Tessa. She danced with some of my female colleagues at first, but soon enough, she was out there with Damon. This time, I felt my stomach turn. I wanted to call her out right then and there, but instead, I forced myself to act unfazed. I wasn't the only one who noticed, though. My coworkers exchanged glances. It was no secret that Damon and I weren't exactly on friendly terms. Garrett, one of my colleagues, leaned over and muttered, "And that's why Damon never brings his wife to these things, so he can grind on everyone else's." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. My face must have given away how I felt because he quickly apologized, saying he was just joking to lighten the mood. The conversation then shifted to whether Damon was even married. He claimed to be single, but some co-workers suspected otherwise. Garrett swore he had proof. He said his sister owns a salon, and one day, he ran into Damon there with a woman he introduced as his wife. But because Garrett has a bit of a prankster reputation, no one fully believed him. They just laughed it off. Meanwhile, I sat there, watching my wife press herself against Damon, feeling like the walls were closing in. I needed air. I stepped out onto the patio to clear my head. A few minutes later, I heard footsteps approaching. I ignored it at first, but then I caught the sound of giggles, followed by low moans. My stomach dropped. Not wanting to be seen, I stepped into the shadows. Seconds later, I watched as a couple stumbled onto the patio, lips locked, hands all over each other. And there they were. My wife and Damon. He had one hand gripping her waist while the other slid under her dress. Tessa clutched his face, completely lost in the moment. I wanted to storm over and knock his teeth in, but instead, I pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking, but I hit record. The patio was dimly lit, but there was just enough light to capture exactly what was happening. At one point, Damon pulled away, smirking as he gripped Tessa's neck and whispered, "We don't have much time before your lowlife husband comes looking for you. Let me give you a real show." She giggled and bent forward, bracing herself against the railing. I felt like my soul had left my body. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen in place, before a janitor wheeled out a garbage bin, unintentionally interrupting them. Tessa and Damon scrambled to fix their clothes, cursing under their breath as they hurried back inside. Once the janitor was gone, I finally stepped out of my hiding spot, walked straight to my car, and drove off. I crashed at a friend's place that night, venting to him until morning. When I finally checked my phone, I saw I had one missed call from Tessa. A pathetic attempt, no doubt, to make it seem like she had been looking for me. She was probably relieved when I disappeared, giving her and Damon the chance to do God knows what for the rest of the night. This afternoon, I went home. She was still in bed, sleeping, no surprise there, considering the kind of night she had. I went straight to my study to figure out my next move. It's bad enough that she cheated on me, but the fact that it was with Damon, the guy who has made my life a living hell, makes it even worse. Right now, I'm trying to track down Damon's wife. I don't know her name. Hell, I don't even know if she really exists. All of his social media accounts are private, and I can't see his friend list. If anyone knows any tricks for finding someone like that, I'd appreciate the help. Update 1. A lot of people have been asking if I ever saw any signs of this happening. Honestly? I don't know. Maybe I was just too damn trusting. A few months after that first Christmas party, sometime in the spring, I was mindlessly scrolling through my Facebook feed when something caught my eye. It was a comment from Damon on one of Tessa's posts. That stopped me in my tracks. I turned to Tessa and asked if she'd been in touch with him. She barely looked up and said no, adding that he was just another Facebook friend, like the thousands of others she had. Apparently, he had sent her a friend request after the party, and she had accepted it without a second thought. No big deal, according to her. But it was a big deal to me. From that moment on, I started keeping a closer eye on her profile. And sure enough, Damon was always there, leaving flattering comments and dropping heart emojis on her pictures. I confronted her again, but she dismissed it, saying it was just one of hundreds of comments she gets. Now, Tessa isn't some social media influencer, but she's very active online, and her profile is completely open to the public. I told her straight up, Damon isn't just some random stranger from the internet. He's a guy I work with. And not just any guy, someone who goes out of his way to make my life miserable. He barely even acknowledges me at the office, so why the hell is he so interested in my wife's photos? Instead of taking me seriously, she shot back with sarcasm. Well, maybe you should ask him yourself. That set me off. He's nothing to me, Tessa. I can't question him about it, but you? You're my wife. And it hurts to see you entertaining a man whose entire mission is to bring me down. And believe me, Damon had been working hard at that. Over time, he had pulled every trick in the book to make me look bad in front of management. Sometimes, it worked. I'd taken some heat more than once because of him. He was also a bootlicker, the kind of guy who knew how to cozy up to the right people and manipulate them into being on his side. And Tessa? She knew all of this. She knew the kind of games he played at the office, yet she still let his comments slide into her notifications like it was nothing. This went on until July. Then, my department landed a major project, and as part of it, I had to travel twice a month to our client's office in Seattle. Work became relentless. I barely had time to breathe, let alone worry about anything outside of the office. Meanwhile, Damon, who was supposed to be on the same team, handling the same workload, was always somehow free, hanging out in the lobby, chatting people up, while I was drowning in deadlines. It was exhausting, but I took it as a challenge and kept pushing forward. During that time, I noticed a shift in Tessa. She started becoming emotionally distant. At first, I thought it was because of my constant travel and long work hours. To make up for it, I started taking her to fancy dinners on the weekends, buying her expensive gifts, anything to remind her that I was still there. But she never complained about my absence. She never even acknowledged the growing distance between us. And that was what bothered me the most. At one point, I even asked my manager to ease up on my travel schedule or at least alternate the trips between Damon and me. But he shut that down immediately, saying I was the more skilled one when it came to handling the client. That pissed me off. If I'm so skilled, I snapped, then why is it that Damon wins all the Achiever of the Quarter awards while all I get is criticism? He had no real answer to that, just fed me some empty promise about putting my name in for the next promotion. The look on his face told me everything. It was a lie. That evening, when Tessa finally woke up from what must have been the deepest sleep of her life, she casually asked, "Why did you leave me alone at the party?" I just stared at her for a moment before saying, "You needed me? I thought you were having a great time with your new friend." She laughed and rolled her eyes. "Oh, don't be a jealous baby. It was just a dance." I forced a smile and let it go. Let her think I was just upset about the dancing. let her believe that was the problem. Because I was about to strike back when they least expected it. At that point, I was still on the hunt for Damon's wife. But the search wasn't going well. I tried looking her up using his last name, but the results were overwhelming, nothing that led me straight to her. The only option left? Finding Damon's home address through the company database and paying him a little visit. Update 2. A lot of people pointed out that it's nearly impossible to track someone down without a name or social media handle. And honestly, they were right. I was about ready to show up at Damon's house when my friend reminded me about Garrett. Garrett had mentioned Damon's wife before. Maybe he could help. Now, Garrett isn't exactly someone I enjoy talking to. He's got a big mouth and loves stirring up drama. But desperate times, right? The next day at work, I casually struck up a conversation with him and, after some small talk, asked, "Hey, do you know anything about Damon's wife?" His face lit up with a smirk. "Knew you'd ask about her, especially after last night's twerking." I clenched my jaw. Classic Garrett. I wanted to straight up ask for her name, but I hesitated. Maybe he saw the desperation in my face because he suddenly said, "You want her name or contact info?" "Yes. Please." The words flew out of my mouth before I could even think. Garrett told me her name and said he'd check with his sister for her number. But that wasn't necessary. I took her name and searched across all social media platforms. Eventually, I found her on Twitter. Her profile said she held a management position at one of the top global firms. Without wasting time, I sent her a message. "I need to speak with you about something important regarding your husband." She responded almost immediately with her number and asked me to call. Something about her message told me she was a sharp woman, poised, confident. No nonsense. I dialed her number and introduced myself. I kept it subtle at first, telling her that my wife and her husband had been involved in something shady. Then, I mentioned that I had video proof. She asked if we could meet after work. I agreed. When I met her in person, I was taken aback by her presence. She carried herself with grace and intelligence, one of those women who exuded both beauty and power. And I couldn't, for the life of me, understand why any man would cheat on a woman like her. But then again, Damon is a fool. I told her everything. Showed her the video. Tears welled in her eyes, but she held herself together. She was shocked to learn that spouses had been invited to the office party because Damon had told her they weren't. I asked if she had ever suspected him of cheating. She admitted she had caught him sexting random women twice before, but at the time, it hadn't seemed serious enough to end their marriage. I told her that Damon claims to be single at work and has a reputation for fooling around with junior colleagues. That was the final straw. She snapped. "That son of a b*** needs to be taught a lesson," she shouted. "Do you have a plan?" "Not yet," I admitted. "But I know I'm going to make them both pay." She looked at me, eyes burning with determination. "Let's do it together." And just like that, we became partners in revenge. We've come up with some very interesting ways to destroy Tessa and Damon. Update 3, buckle up. This is going to be wild. Tessa and Damon are about to get served with a steaming hot plate of karma. Paige, Damon's wife, 33, and I came up with a revenge plan that required patience and precision. We knew they were lying about the sleepovers with friends, about the last-minute work trips, about every pathetic excuse they came up with, but we played alone. We pretended to be too busy with our own lives to care. Tessa and I co-own our house, but I made sure to fix that. I drafted an updated ownership document making me the sole owner and slipped it into a stack of papers. One evening, when Tessa was rushing to head out, lying about going shopping with friends while actually meeting up with Damon, I deliberately made her run late. I blocked access to the bathroom wardrobe, making her fumble around in frustration. Then, just as she was about to leave, I handed her a pile of documents to sign, telling her it was for an insurance renewal. It wasn't suspicious after all. I handled all our finances, and she was used to just signing whatever I put in front of her. Without a second glance, she signed everything, including the document that handed over the house entirely to me. Meanwhile, Paige was hitting Damon where it hurt. She emptied their joint bank account, borrowed his car, then sold it off to a rookie. Their home, which actually belonged to Paige, was secretly leased out to a new tenant, and she got a restraining order against Damon to make sure he couldn't come near the property. As for Tessa, I blocked every single credit card she had been using, the ones I had been paying for. Those were just the opening moves. The real fun came next. Paige played it smart. As Damon's birthday approached, she surprised him with a 5-day couple's vacation to Florida, all expenses paid. He was thrilled. But the day before the trip, Paige conveniently had an emergency at work and told him she couldn't make it. Predictably, Damon immediately suggested taking one of his guy friends along instead. Paige, playing the part of the understanding wife, agreed. After all, it was a non-refundable package, and she wouldn't want it to go to waste. Around the same time, I told Tessa I had to leave for a 15-day work trip. She barely reacted. A few days later, she called me, claiming she was heading to Vegas for a friend's wedding. I asked, which friend? She hesitated for just a second before spinning some nonsense about a childhood friend she had lost touch with but suddenly reconnected with. She couldn't refuse the invite, she said. Sounds great, I told her. Have fun. She fed me lie after lie, and I just smiled, knowing exactly where she was actually going on that 5-day trip to Florida with Damon. While they were off enjoying their little lust-filled vacation, Paige and I set everything in motion. We drained their accounts, sold off assets, rented out their homes, and finalized the restraining orders. When Tessa and Damon returned, they were in for the shock of their lives. But that wasn't all. Damon had been running his mouth at work, and that's where he really messed up. Not only was he bragging about sleeping with my wife, but he was mocking me loudly. He told his work buddies that I wasn't man enough to satisfy Tessa. He read out private texts from her, laughing at how she craved him while belittling me. He made outrageous claims about our sex life, taking pleasure in humiliating me. He thought he was untouchable. So I made sure to record every word. Some of his own so-called friends approached me just to rub salt in the wound, repeating what Damon had been saying. That was the final straw. I compiled all the evidence and sent it straight to HR, demanding his termination for workplace harassment and mental torture. I even warned the company that if they didn't take immediate action, I'd take it public, exposing everything on social media and company review platforms. The company, fearing the damage, assured me that Damon would be fired as soon as he returned from his little getaway. I had no reason to stick around after that. I submitted my resignation and requested an immediate release. Before leaving, I wrote a letter to Tessa. She would find it waiting for her when she returned. The letter laid everything out, the truth about Damon, the lies she had believed, and the consequences of her actions. I told her, in no uncertain terms, that Damon wasn't single, as he had been claiming. That he had a wife who was now my girlfriend. Yes, Paige and I had become more than just allies in revenge. Through our shared betrayal, we had bonded. We realized how much we had in common: our intellect, our ambitions, our drive. She was smart, witty, and successful. Meanwhile, Tessa was a bum. She had never held a full-time job, constantly whined about the little work she did have, and spent most of her time depending on me for everything. Now, she was going to have to figure it all out on her own. Oh, and Damon? He got an extra dose of karma. Right before he left for the trip, Paige swiped his credit card just enough that he wouldn't notice until he was in Florida. The moment he landed, he would realize he had no money. To make things even better, Paige also canceled the hotel bookings right before they arrived. No refund, of course. Because who cares about the money when you're getting the ultimate satisfaction? Damon and Tessa were about to have the worst trip of their lives. No money. No place to stay. Just a whole lot of regret. And as for Paige and me? We decided we weren't even going to waste a dime on divorcing these losers. If they wanted to break free from us, they could pay for it. But with no job, no assets, and no financial backup, that wasn't happening anytime soon. Just to make sure they had no way to benefit from us in any way, we updated our wills and removed them from everything. If anything ever happened to us, they wouldn't get a single penny. We were done. Paige and I packed up and left. I had secured a new job, twice the salary, directly with the client company in Seattle. Paige, meanwhile, decided to take a well-deserved break. She had enough savings to enjoy life for a couple of years without working, and that's exactly what she planned to do. By the time Damon and Tessa returned, we were already gone. Our belongings were being shipped to Seattle. We were on our way to the Caribbean, sipping cocktails on a white sandy beach, basking in the sun. And you know what? It felt damn good. Paige is a woman who challenges me, who keeps up with my thoughts, who makes me feel alive again. We're not putting any labels on it, no need for pressure or forever promises. We're just enjoying each other's company, living in the moment. And honestly, it's the best decision I've ever made.